trying to make the case for 4 more years this week. Convention night 1 showcased, if nothing else, that Republicans aren't all that confident about where they stand 70 days before the election, or even in their own base, for that matter, as last night's speakers delivered dark and disconnected messages with fear-mongering and anger not likely aimed at anyone other than their most loyal backers.
Your family will not be safe in the radical Democrats' America.
Every American must be free to live without fear of violence in your country, in your communities, and in your homes.
They'll disarm you, empty the prisons, lock you in your home, and invite MS-13 to live next door.
They want to control what you see and think and believe so that they can control how you live. They want to enslave you to the weak, dependent, liberal, victim ideology to the point that you will not recognize this country or yourself.
The attempt to shore up the Trump base comes as new polling shows Trump's perilous positioning against Joe Biden, at least right now. The president is trailing by 10 points nationally, by 3 points in North Carolina, and by 4 points in Florida, both key battleground states. Joining our conversation, former Obama campaign manager David Plouffe and professor of journalism and politics at Morgan State University, a contributor for the GRIO, our friend Jason Johnson. David Plouffe, let me start with you. You have said over and over and over again, and I'm a student of the campaigns you run, that this is a undertaking of addition, not subtraction. If you showcase the McCloskeys, who are you trying to add?
Well, Nicole, I agree with you. I mean, I think, well, one of two things is happening. Either Trump and his campaign understand that they have a lot of work to do to get their base where they want, or this is all they know. They don't have it in their toolbox to appeal to the middle. But I think last night, the only speech that you might suggest that a suburban voter who's left Trump or a senior citizen in Florida who's now with Biden might listen was Tim Scott's. I think everything else was just speeches for the base. And I think you're going to see the rest of the week. Listen, at the end of the day, Trump's who matters here. So you could have Dwight Eisenhower, Ronald Reagan, and George W. Bush give speeches at this convention. And what Trump says at the end of the convention is going to matter more than all of them combined. And that's the real question is, are we going to see something different from Trump on Thursday? And even if we do, is he going to carry that forward the rest of the campaign? So if strategy is at play here, they were screaming out last night that they don't like where the base is in this election. Yeah,
I mean, I had that feeling too. And if you can watch these nights with your head, not your gut, through the screaming and through the fear-mongering was their fear. Their fear that coalition that shocked them. I mean, they really didn't expect to win 4 years ago. But what comes through in this convention program is almost disorienting. I mean, they're hanging on tighter now than they were 4 years ago. And I guess I just wonder, they're launching the same attacks. They're running against someone totally and completely different. I mean, Joe Biden came out right after the murder of George Floyd and said, this is a tragedy. We're going to get on it. But I do not support defunding the police. So I guess my question is about how sticky the lies are, not with their base. We know the base buys it, but with the people they need to add.
Well, it's a great question, Nicole. I mean, when you look at political history and the history of political attacks, which sadly I've studied, I'm sure you have as well, they have to have a shred of truth or credibility for them to be effective. So Joe Biden does not scare people. It's almost like Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr. and Kimberly Guilfoyle and all these people, they finally accept that they're hemorrhaging vote in the suburbs. And so their very crude answer is Joe Biden is going to eliminate the suburbs. And you'll have MS-13 living next to you. You know, the suburban voters that have left Trump or at risk of, further leaving Trump, they're not worried about MS-13. They're worried about the coronavirus, their jobs, their small businesses, their kids who aren't back at school, and Trump's lack of character and empathy. So they're trying to scare people instead of trying to correct the main hit to the engine here, which is Trump's performance in office.
Jason, I also keep thinking it's a profound misunderstanding of the suburbs. I mean, you know who's in the suburbs? all the people who could afford to leave the cities when the pandemic took out our cities because of Donald Trump's failures, they've now moved to the suburbs. The suburbs are more liberal than they were 4 years ago, and the suburbs are more diverse than they've ever been, and they're running on calling people in the suburbs, they keep talking about housewives, suburban housewives, and talking, making them less diverse. Frankly, there's more diversity and more people from cities living in the suburbs now than ever.
Yeah, it's like this would be an awesome, awesome convention in like 92. But it really doesn't work for 2020. The suburbs are full of black, brown, tan people and middle-class folks who can't afford to live in million-dollar condos in the city. I live in the suburbs. The suburbs are brown. The suburbs are where you have bilingual Burger Kings and McDonald's. So when Donald Trump is talking about this mythical suburb, he's talking about children, parents who have kids who go to school with 3 or 4 different kinds of races, and they come home and they're used to it, and Cinco de Mayo festivals are done without brownface. He doesn't even know the country he's talking to at this particular point. But I think yesterday, and I agree with Tim Scott. I was able to hear him after I cleared my ears after Kimberly Guilfoyle. She was still yelling at me. But by the time they got to Tim Scott last night, that was one of the most compelling speeches I saw. But here's the problem with it, Nicole, and this is what I think demonstrates the fact that Trump doesn't even know what his base is anymore. Tim Scott was there to make suburban white people, urban white people, and middle-class black people take a different look at Donald Trump. But nothing he said resonated with the reality that we're seeing outside. People are still losing jobs. People are still afraid of COVID. People still can't go to the movies. So when Tim Scott gives this sort of baritone, Donald Trump has cared more for black people, it doesn't look like that's the case. And that's what I thought was strange, is this entire campaign, this entire RNC doesn't fit the reality that the viewers are seeing right now. And that's why I don't think it's going to resonate. The ratings were terrible.
Jason, the other thing happening in the suburbs are kids are not going back to school because of Donald Trump's failures to eradicate coronavirus, to have same-day testing in place for every single school teacher in this country or kids. I mean, they tried to rewrite some of that, and then Donald Trump, even in a scripted, taped performance, managed to invoke hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah, I thought that entire segment... Nicole, the segments, I'm thinking back, I don't know, it was like 20 years ago, I was a kid. I remember seeing Liddy Dole. Do you remember when, like, Liddy Dole got off the stage, I think it was like 96, and went out in the audience and talked to people, and it was this warm, amazing, like, Oprah moment. And this was Donald Trump's opportunity to do that. He talked to regular people, but rather than him saying, I care about you, I'm concerned about your kids, how's your work doing, it was a praise fest. It was like a bunch of clones of Mike Pence. Everybody just had to sit there and worship the president. And that's not what the American people want to hear. They want to hear that I'm rolling up my sleeves and I'm going to make sure that your kids can go back to school and that you can visit your family by Thanksgiving and we can all go see Tenet because COVID's going to be gone. They failed to present a message about how the dangers and the traumas that Americans are dealing with today are going to change anytime soon. And again, that's not even your base at this point. That is literally only cultists, because your base is out there suffering because they haven't been able to work and they haven't got a $600 check from the government in about a month.
And they can't get a same-day COVID test to know if it's safe to go back to the office. Right. Jason Johnson, David Plouffe, two of the smartest people on the planet on all these topics. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.